At the end of every school year, I would always be so excited about spending a good 2 weeks to myself, not thinking about school, not looking anything up, not having to plan or prep or start to try to dive into learning and do all of these different things. I needed at least 2 weeks. But after those 2 weeks, I was ready to start thinking about it. I would do just little bitty tasks here and there that would allow me to feel so much better about going into the beginning of the school year. Because let's be honest, beginning of the school year, the only thing that you're really focusing on is getting your classroom organized. You're having to sift through things, you're having to reorganize things, especially those like piles and piles that maybe you've just like shoved into drawers or you've shoved into some form of like a box or something. That was definitely always me. And so I feel as though you need to have 6 specific things that are really going to allow you to enjoy your summer to the fullest. And I'm going to share these 6 little things that you can be doing throughout the summer so that you can enjoy the time away from the classroom, fill your cup back up, but then also be prepared when it does come back around to where you're going back into your classroom and you're prepping for the upcoming school year. I'm not going to waste any time here, so let's talk about what are those 6 specific things that you can be doing over the summer to help you really enjoy the summer and not feel stressed about going into the upcoming school year. So the first thing that you can do is to create your ideal schedule. Now, I say ideal because let's be honest, there is no schedule that's going to be perfect. And your schedule might end up changing ever so slightly when it comes to you officially getting the keys into your classroom or getting your classroom list or your schedule. Things are going to end up changing. It's inevitable, but instead of just waiting for something to happen and allowing that to feel stressful, you can be proactive knowing that, hey, there are going to be some slight tweaks that I might end up having to make in order to accommodate this new schedule that I've been given. So create an ideal schedule. And while you might be thinking, this is a waste of my time, I guarantee you it is not going to be a waste of your time. So here's what I would recommend doing. Ask a teammate if this is a new school that you are at and you don't really know what the schedules look like at this specific school. So get with somebody that maybe your principal has given you in contact with and see if you can reach out and if they will share a previous year's schedule. That will at least give you something to be able to go off of. Again, your schedule might change depending on your specials times, your lunch times, your recess times, especially if you don't do things as a grade level team and you end up all having different schedules for that day. So reach out to somebody. 2, you can look at your own previous schedule that you've had. So if this is a school that you are still staying at, you're not moving grade levels, you're not changing schools, then look at your own schedule and just kind of base it off of that. But consider what are some of those tweaks that you could be making in order to really enhance and maximize the learning opportunities within your classroom. So find those areas where you can reduce some transitions, where maybe you can change some things around. And while it might seem ideal to have like a read aloud at the end of the day, if that's not a conducive time and you have like a weird 10 to 15 minute block between, a recess and a special, then you might want to end up considering changing some things around to make things flow a little bit better within your schedule time. Number 2 that you can be working on is to create and prep, that is a key word here, some first day of school activities for your students. Now, I said to create a list because let's be honest, first day or first 3 days or 4 days, however many days you end up going back on that first week of school, it's going to change a lot. And so what I like to always do is to be prepared and have a list of various different activities that you might allow your students to be able to engage with. Now, here's a tip for you that when you're planning out these activities, you want to make sure you have a really good balance of them. So I would always plan out what are some of these like quiet, independent activities, the ones where you're just like, oh my gosh, I have a load of these papers that I need to get organized. The office is already calling for them, or I have to figure out this like bus schedule for this specific student, and you just need your kids to just sit down and do something independently. That's those types of tasks. Now, I do recommend that when you're planning out these activities, don't do anything that's going to be too taxing on a student's cognitive load, meaning you don't want to give them something that's too hard, right? Like you don't want them writing out like a 2-page paper all about themselves or having them complete like a whole sheet of math problems or something to that extent. You want to do something that's going to be fairly easy that they can do independently on their own. So while this might seem really, really dumb, having some form of like word search or having some like little brain activities, crossword puzzles, that type of thing are typically best because normally, for the most part, they can do those on their own without really having to kind of stress their thinking out. At the beginning of the year, if you're having kids like write things or you're having them trying to do these huge assignments and you don't really know where they are academically and what their readiness level is at, then you're not going to be able to accommodate them. And that's going to cause behaviors to start to flare up, and you're going to see them kind of burst out in those first few days because kids are already anxious and stressed on those first few days of school because they don't know other kids. They may not be very comfortable with the new grade level. Maybe it's a transitioning school year. So if they've gone from one building to another building, that just adds in a whole new dynamic. And so you want to create these activities that are going to be pretty simplified for the most part. The next type of activity that I would recommend is to have some form of, I like to call these like morning meeting activities. Now, what I mean by morning meeting activities is that it's like the get to know you activities that are pretty short. Like you could do them within 5 minutes. And I like to have like a list of like 5 to maybe 10 of these that I could just be able to pull from and have my students engage with them. They're great because they're collaborative. They're typically not super high energy, but it's something that's going to be really fun and the kids are going to enjoy those. So incorporating those as much as you can throughout the day. Another type of activity is going to be like those really big activities that you can plan for. So what are some of those like big classroom things? I think about like escape rooms or like hunts or things like that. That's going to be very highly collaborative. That's going to get them to kind of familiarize themselves with maybe the school or the classroom or the teachers. There was one year that we did like this big, huge Pokemon theme because Pokemon was like really, really big at that time. And so they had to go and find like the Pokemons, and each one had like a QR code, and the QR code would give them information about a specific staff member within our school. And those were really fun and exciting, but you don't want to do those too often. So I would probably do maybe one a day, and even that might be too much, maybe one every other day if you have the flexibility within your schedule. So planning out a nice balance of activities is going to just make your day so much more smooth, and it's not going to make it feel like you're having to just constantly entertain them all day long, which is really, really hard, especially when your body is not used to either being up, talking all day long, walking around and doing all these things because you're just coming off of summer mode as well. So you have to almost get yourself acclimated just as much as you have to get your students acclimated to being back at school. The third thing that you need to work on is going to be to write your first day of lesson plans. So the first day, or even for me, typically it was about the first 3 days of school, were always just a little bit wonky. They were not my normal schedule. The kids were doing things that were a little bit off of their routines. We were doing some really fun activities, engaging things that we wanted them to kind of explore with, especially with just get to know you and things like that. And so we had our schedules just a little bit off. And so what I would recommend is I would break down your schedule within like a 10 to 15 minute increments. And so if you have your specials is a really good time to kind of look at. So if you have 30-minute specials, I would break your time blocks down into 10-minute blocks. If you have a 15 or 45-minute special time, so like an art, PE, music class, that type of thing, if it's about a 45, then I would break them down, your entire day down by 15-minute increments. And that typically works really well when it comes to like planning things. And so once you have those broken down, you can start to space things out. And I would think about having maybe like 3 to 4 routines that you're introducing for that school day. You're not sitting there and trying to plan out every single routine and you're giving the students all the routines they're going to have in one day, because they're not going to remember it. There is no way. They need to have opportunities to engage with it. They need to have opportunities to practice it. And so you want to have these spaced out really well. So think about what are those routines that you absolutely have to have on the first day of school, like bathroom or lunch or recess. Those typically tend to be like the most important ones on that first day of school. And then after that, you can start to kind of build on it. You can create a list of all the routines that you're keeping track of and you're having conversations about with your students. So there's a lot of things that you can incorporate into your day to kind of help make those a little bit more tangible for them to be able to remember, because it is a lot of information and chances are they're not going to remember it from day to day, especially on that first day of school. So once you have your routines in there, you can take that list of activities and be able to kind of sprinkle them in here and there. Again, trying to keep a really good balance with some get to know you hands-on activities, with some of these like sit down activities, with maybe some read alouds that you're going to incorporate there. And then also having maybe like a really fun activity that you want to do to build that excitement in classroom community with your students. The fourth thing that you want to focus on is creating systems over the summer. So what are the systems that you know that you're going to have in place? I always think about like checklists are a really big one. Emails are a big one. Thinking about my slide decks and being able to create kind of consistency with maybe some of my slide decks. Having various types of letters that I send home with my students. And so I have a little beginning of the year like folder that creates all of my systems and my templates in the very beginning. So once I have those, I know that once I get my class list, I can start filling things in rather quickly, and I can get those things printed and have them ready to go so that I can kind of track things. Assessments is another really big one at the beginning of the year, and how I'm choosing to track my assessments and look at the data that I'm collecting with my students. And so I highly recommend sitting down and thinking about what are those systems that you really want to kind of create and have in place and have them ready to go, so you're not having to build that at the very beginning of the school year when you have like 40 other things that you're trying to do in one day. The fifth thing that you need to be working on is thinking about how you want to plan and identify for building classroom community within your classroom. So community is a big piece. When students feel safe, when they feel welcomed, then they are more likely to learn. There is evidence based on that when it comes to research. And so we have to think about how we're creating that welcoming and inviting community classroom. And so thinking about how you're going to build in your rules, how are you going to build in some positive reward systems, what are those communication systems that you're going to have with your families to be able to build community with them as well. Also talking about like, how are you going to have promises, how are you going to help set goals with students, and how to build some of those conversations, how are you going to have like growth mindset as a classroom. There are so many aspects when it comes to building classroom community that's involved in this that's really, really important for the beginning of the school year. And so thinking about some ways that you can build that, I recommend just creating a list of those and then again incorporating it into your first day of school plans. So whatever list that you're creating for activities, maybe it's like a goals activity, then you might have that goals activity in like a quiet sit down piece, right? So you might do a little bit of instruction and then you're going to have them go out and think about maybe some goals after you've brainstormed and created some together as an entire class. So lots of ideas that are out there, but this is a very, very important section. So I highly recommend that you give yourself a good like 20 to 30 minutes just to sit there and brainstorm these. The last thing that you really want to focus on before you head back to school next year is to create your first 10 days of lessons. Now, this is specifically for building your literacy block. So as a literacy teacher, and that is kind of where my heart lies, is you really want to think about how are you scaffolding the learning and how are you helping to prepare your students for diving into really heavy content at the beginning of the year. You don't want to have something where it's like too much fluff, but then you don't want to also dive into content so heavy that they are absolutely like clawing their eyes out at the beginning of the school year. Now, for some of you, you probably don't have that option and your school might end up saying, you're starting curriculum on this day. And I feel so sorry for you. That is never an environment that you want to be in, because we understand and we know that building these routines, creating this community at the very beginning of the school year is so important. And when you're diving into content the first day or the second day of school, it makes it really, really challenging. And so thinking about those first 10 days, here are some tips that I recommend. So the first thing is to think about what are maybe some of those skills that you want to incorporate. For example, some skills like asking and answering questions, inferencing, predictions. These are all going to be things that they have heard over and over and over again, especially if you're an upper elementary teacher, they've heard these things. And so you're not really getting them to do like heavy lifting when it comes to these skills. You're just kind of trying to jog their memory, but you're also trying to see what they're doing. And so you want to incorporate some of these lessons. And so I always like to introduce a new picture book, and then I would tie that picture book with some form of a skill, and I would model it, and then the students would go back out and then they would have an opportunity to work on it. And that was a really great way for us to kind of build this routine of a mini lesson and going out and doing some independent work, but also giving us the opportunity to have conversations, to build community, and it not feel like it's just a ton of work that they're doing at the very beginning of the school year. The other tip that I recommend is identifying what are those routines that you're going to have specific to your literacy block. So whether it's going to be, are they going to have a warm-up that they're going to do at the beginning of every day during your literacy block? Do you want them to have certain whiteboards on certain days? Do you want them to learn how to like get their folders out? Where are they going to be turning things in? All of these are going to be routines that you really want to build in. And so because you're not doing a huge drawn out big lesson on these days, these are short, sweet, simple, to the point. They're not anything super heavy. Students are then going to be able to practice these routines on top of that. So it's kind of a little mixture of both, but you're easing them in. You're still getting to know them as learners. You're helping to ensure that they have these routines so that you have a very well-oiled machine before you get started with that really heavy content at the beginning of the school year. So lots of things that you could be working on, and I'm sure it feels a little bit overwhelming as I'm talking through some of these lists, but I promise you that if you take this time to be proactive now, it's going to make the beginning of the year so much easier for you. Now, if you're sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, Bridget, I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to do any of this, I got you, because I am offering a Building the Literacy Block boot camp this summer. It's going to start on July 8th, and it's going to be a Facebook group, so you do have to have Facebook for it. And this Facebook group is going to have 3 live trainings. We're going to take you through an entire workbook with all of the things that I just mentioned. I'm going to give you lists of resources, give you templates, give you activities that you can go ahead and start planning and prepping for the beginning of the school year. That way you can actually enjoy the rest of your July. So it's a couple of hours every single day for 1 week in July, and then you don't really have to think about anything until the beginning of the school year, and you can enjoy kind of easing yourself back in versus feeling like you're like stressing and having to do all of the things at the beginning of the year. So if this is something you're interested in, I'm going to leave a link for the Building the Literacy Block boot camp. It is a small minimal fee. It is $7 to be able to get into the camp, the boot camp. So you can pay for it, and then you can go ahead and request access to the group, and then we will let everybody in on July 6th into the Facebook group to kind of get you geared up and get you excited and prepped and ready to go. I promise you it is going to be completely worth your time. If you are somebody who's like, I got this, Bridget, because I have all these things ready to go, kudos to you. I am so excited. I hope that you are able to get all of these things done. And I know you will, to be honest. Like, I know you're going to be able to do it, and you're going to kill it. And it's going to be a great beginning of the year. I do want to mention that if you are a Bridging Literacy community member, access to this group is completely free. So you do not have to pay for the Building the Literacy Block Bootcamp Facebook group. You get access to that for free. Go into the BLC and go into monthly resources, and you can find the link to the Facebook group there. Okay, so those are going to be the 6 things that you really need to work on for you to really enjoy your summer the most. Again, it doesn't have to be super fancy. It doesn't have to be something that you spend hours and hours doing. If you wanted to devote maybe an hour a day over the summer to be able to work on this, I guarantee you will have all of this done and so much more. And you're going to feel so much more proactive and ready for this beginning of the school year, going into it stress-free. So 6 things that you need to do to focus on. Let's just do a a quick recap. Number one is create an ideal schedule. Again, we all know it's going to end up changing. Don't stress about that right now. Number two is to create a list of first day of school activities. So breaking them down by the activity type so that way you can sprinkle it in where you need it. Number three is to write your first day of school lesson plans. So really focusing on kind of the nuances that we have at the beginning of the year, because our schedules are just not the same when it comes to our normal schedule that we're going to experience all year round. Number four is to develop those systems and create those systems that you're going to have in place. So any form of templates that you might need, go ahead and have those ready so that you could just start to fill things in and have it ready to go for the beginning of the year. Number five is to identify and plan for building classroom community. It is truly such an important concept, and you really need to embed this at the beginning of the year because it helps to build that growth mindset. It helps to build that resilience, the persistency that we want to be able to see in kids, and that's really going to help do that here. And then the last thing is to start planning out your first 10 days of your literacy block. And what does that look like as far as scaffolding the learning, building in those routine practices, and helping your students feel successful before jumping into big content. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching this very short video. If you have any questions about anything here, please leave it in the comments below. I look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. Bye. Actually, I'm coming back. I'm coming back because next week I'm going to have a special guest on this channel. And so you will want to see this video that's going to be coming up. It's going to be great. I have a guest that you are going to love, and it's going to help make learning inside of your classroom so much more tangible and understandable and broken down for your students. And you're going to see some really high success just with this guest that I have coming on. So be sure to tune back down into this YouTube channel so that you can check out the guest that I have coming up very soon. Okay, bye.